We'll be test 1, 2. There we go. We'll be starting here in just a moment, but there is a sign-up sheet. If anyone wants to speak on any of the bills, if you'll go ahead and sign up, please. Okay, we're going to call this meeting of Governmental Affairs Subcommittee to order. And Representative Anderson is going to lead us in a word of prayer.
Let us pray. Dear kind and heavenly Father, God, we thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to come before you today, Lord, to conduct the business of the people of the state of Georgia, God. Lord, we ask your guiding hand in any discussion we make, our hearts to be open and our minds to be open to understanding, God. Lord, we ask that we take your principles to heart as we go forward and make decisions and represent the people we are sent here to serve. Lord, we ask that you'll be with those overseas, God, who are going through the ultimate turmoil, God. We ask that your guiding hand will help them and help our leaders as we navigate how we can best serve the people of this world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Representative Anderson, if you will, go ahead and present your bill number 1461, if you will, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I am here today to present to you House Bill 1461. I'm working from LC 471715S, and I emphasize that particular version because this thing's been through about 8 versions since we started. This past summer and fall, as you well know, we conducted a study committee on annexation and cityhood issues, focusing primarily on annexation dispute resolution. Our study committee final report had a couple of pages of recommendations from the committee. This bill takes a big chunk of those, what I like to call the meat of those recommendations, things that can improve the process in significant ways. A consistent theme that we heard in testimony in our study committee hearings was the concerns about communication, concerns about timing, and the process itself. There are very few situations where there are disputed annexations that more communication would not have helped the situation. So we've put together in this bill a combination of timing changes, deadline changes, as well as reporting issues and that sort of thing. And if you will, attached to the copy of the bill you've got a brief summary that I put together with the help of Blake Doss regarding this bill, and we'll just kind of run through that real quickly in case you have any questions. We've added some definitions of some terms and some phrases that are used in the existing code, as well as some new terms that are used. We've also extended the notification deadline for municipalities to notify counties and impacted school systems. We have included impacted school systems in notification on this. An earlier version had a little more involvement from school systems, but after a lot of vetting and discussion on this, we've kind of scaled it back to, at this point, just notification. We've increased that from 5 days to 30 days. We've also extended the shot clock, if you will, the time frame that a county has to respond as to whether or not they're going to dispute an annexation, from 30 days to 45 days. Those two changes primarily were to allow local governments in their normal course of business, their normal meeting schedules, to better address and consider annexation proposals that are before them. We've also added additional means of notification delivery. We call them verifiable delivery methods. There was basically one or two methods outlined in the original code that we have extended to other verifiable delivery methods. We've allowed arbitration panelists to serve up to 4 times per year. One of the issues we've had or encountered in some situations has been the ability to impanel a arbitration panel in the time specified in the code, simply because there's a very short defined list of people, and there's limitations as to how many times each of them can serve. So we've extended that up to 4 times per year. We've also authorized the Carl Vinson Institute of Government to provide additional training. Now that is precursed on the legislature providing funding that would assist with that. We've also included the option for panels to involve or to employ through DCA court reporters and or hearing officers if they determine it necessary. Let's see, we've also extended, we've allowed the panel to extend the 60-day arbitration period for up to 10 days at the chairman's decision of the panel. And that is to ensure that they have proper time to perform their function in the dispute resolution. We've also allowed a provision that would that with mutual agreement from all disputing parties, the panel's discussions could be stayed for up to 180 days while a negotiation is attempted to try to work out any differences. We've also come in and allowed virtual and teleconference meetings of the panels. The original code calls for only in-person meetings. Over the last 2 years, one of the things we've learned is sometimes that's not possible given certain circumstances, and in many times a virtual option is even preferable due to people's locations and schedules. We have currently code requires that arbitration costs are split 75% paid by the county, 25% by the municipality. We have changed that to an equal sharing among all parties involved, unless, of course, there is determined to be a not valid dispute, and in that case, that those costs are borne by the filing party who is deemed not valid. Let's see. We also require that DCA maintain a database of arbitration results. One of the things we found out, and I got back to communication, one of the things we determined in these hearings is that a lot of times things happen, but they don't get reported and recorded. So we're requiring that the Department of Community Affairs maintain a database of arbitration results and negotiated decisions or results that are outside of the arbitration panel's findings. We did increase the binding time for conditions by the arbitration panel from 1 year to 2 years. And that was a request made by several parties just to kind of give them a little more authority and a little more teeth in the process. And then finally, on this summary sheet, I've got that any agreements reached outside of the panel decisions are to be reported to DCA just as they are reported as if they were arbitration panel findings and results. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield for questions.
Okay, and I do want to mention also that we will not be taking votes today. These are hearings only. We're going to vet these bills, and let's see, 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question has to do with it's line 183, and that has to do with not valid. Do we define what that is? Does that just mean if it wasn't approved, or can you have a definite, I kind of want to know what that means. Just because it got turned down, does it make it not valid?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, there are 3 or 4 items at the beginning of the code section that define what a valid objection is. I don't think we actually put a definition for valid, because there's also, and I can't remember exactly which line in here, but there's also a line in here that says that the first order of business for the dispute resolution, the arbitration panel, is to determine the validity of the objection. So that is, there are guidelines that an objection can be filed based upon, and the first order of business of the panel is to determine if the objection meets those guidelines.
Thank you.
Let's see, Representative Gullett.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for your work on this. I know that this has been, you've worked on it a long time. And the study committee, I think, on it too, right? And working with the players involved, cities and counties, and getting something as complex and as dividing sometimes as annexation can be for cities and counties to agree on where we're at. Great job on this. And, don't have any questions related to the bill, but just want to tell you, great job on this.
Thank you.
Chairman Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I served on the study committee, obviously, and I enjoyed it very much. It was very substantive and it was very helpful and educational to me. I believe, though, that the recommendations that came forward from the study committee have not been fully incorporated. And I want to ask you about a couple. For instance, we are only talking, am I correct? We're only talking about arbitration panels. We're not talking about bond validation hearings.
That is correct. Yes.
And the arbitration panels right now in your bill, in this bill, recommends that notice be given to school districts, but does not grant them standing to come into the dispute resolution system. Am I correct about that?
That is correct. Yes.
So you're telling them we're going to do this to you, but you're not allowing them in the room to talk about it.
That is true. And as the chair lady knows, we had several earlier versions that included different variations of allowing school systems standing in the process. It was a decision that I made kind of late in the process, given the near 11th hour that we're trying to get this thing through, that we would pull that portion out for this time.
And Mr. Chairman, you'll decide, I don't know whether people are going to be testifying today, but I assume that was pulled out by the municipal association, or that was the entity that wanted that pulled out.
I'll say this, there were actually more than one organization that had some issues with that and wanted us to discuss that further before we included that in the bill. The main purpose that we wanted to do right now is put changes in place that can improve the process going forward. And as we maybe next session, assuming we're back here, today is qualifying, so there's a lot of assuming there, but then we can possibly look at further implication or applications of those recommendations.
When the time is right, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote for the bill, but I just want the committee to know there were some other recommendations that the study committee offered. Particularly was one other recommendation from the study committee that be disclosed in the annexation dispute process, the tax incentives and tax abatements, and that is not in here. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let's see, Representative Fleming, we have you on Zoom.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the representative, I just want to thank you for your hard work on this bill. I know what a testy issue this can be. It appears to me from watching you and talking to you that you have worked out what I'll refer to as a compromise between ACCG and GMA on this issue. And I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I just wanted to add, number one, say thank you for working with both of them. And I ask you to please continue to do that through this process. But at this point in the bill and the shape that you have it, can we say that we have somewhat agreement by both of them as to where you are?
Yes, sir. And we actually have representatives from ACCG and GMA here that I believe are signed up to speak to that measure.
Well, that's good to hear. And once again, thank you for your work on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other committee member? Let's see, we have people signed up. Todd Edwards and Charlotte Davis.
If it's all right with you, Mr. Chairman, I have a Commissioner Jeff Rader from DeKalb who will be testifying with me.
Yes, sir. If you'll pull the microphone up and you can testify from there or the table, wherever you've
Let's do the
got.
tape.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Todd Edwards with the Association County Commissioners of Georgia. First of all, I too want to thank Representative Anderson, or Chairman Victor Anderson, as far as the study committee was concerned. It was a long, very deliberative process. I believe there were 5 meetings all over the state. We at ACCG made our recommendations. I know the Municipal Association did as well. It is true, to answer a question that was asked earlier, are there several things that came out of the study committee report that were not included in the bill? That is true, but that's also the art of compromise. We didn't get everything that we wanted, but we do think this is a vast improvement upon the current annexation dispute resolution process. The timing, deadline, reporting, those are the major provisions that are proposed to be revised in this bill. Chairman Darlene Taylor, you had asked regarding the validity. If you look on line 155 of the bill, I mean, it's true. And we did come forward with a recommendation that the cost be split evenly between the city and county. That was in the study committee's report. This version, and I believe that was the correct line, starting on C on 155. So the agreement was, or what we proposed was it be split 50-50. What this version does is it says it can be split 50-50 unless it is a non-valid objection. Now, we did have concerns with that, but after going back through the current law as it stands, it says that the panel shall first decide whether or not the grounds for the objection are valid. So we write up our report, vote on it at the county commission, submit it. And at that point, if they first decide it, then I think we cannot argue as counties that we shouldn't pay the cost up front. Our concern would be if it wasn't decided whether it was valid until the end, then you had your court reporters, the caseworkers, the expert witnesses, et cetera, and then find out at the end, say, if the case didn't go in our favor, the objection wasn't upheld, that's different than having it decided at the beginning. So that's something that, we obviously we don't get everything we want, but we felt very comfortable. And if up front it was considered non-valid, then I think the county's role should be paying. I think at that point, you'd only be considering the per diem charges of the panelists involved. With me today, I have Commissioner Jeff Rader from DeKalb County. He served with ACCG. We too had a subcommittee on annexation. I also recognize in the room Chairman Harry Johnston from Cherokee County, who served in that capacity. And with that, I'll see if Jeff, if you have any comments for this process.
Sure. I'd just like to thank y'all for taking this issue up. In addition to serving on our task force, I co-chaired in 2019 a joint committee between ACCG and GMA to try to address this issue. One of the things that we learned is that this issue is of growing relevance throughout the state, not only in large metropolitan areas, but also in areas that are seeing proposals for new development that may be inconsistent with the plans that have been carefully crafted based upon state regulation and mandate in these communities, and that a annexation can in fact represent a very disruptive change of events when it comes to carefully laid plans of infrastructure, service delivery, and other areas of relevant public policy. So this, I think, is a great first step in trying to improve this process. Ultimately, I think that you will probably see demand in the future for more collaboration be mandated on the issue of annexation and on development policy within growing areas, because the burdens of infrastructure provision and service delivery are so great and affect people outside of the annexed area, which I think is the most important aspect of it, is that an annexation is not internally contained, but in fact has multiple impacts on unincorporated areas that are unrepresented on a municipal government and that can be more affected than the people that are within the major body of the municipality. So I appreciate your work, and we look forward to more work on this issue in the future. Thank you. Did the other commissioner, would you like to speak?
If I may just add a word, yes, thank you so much. Harry Johnston, Cherokee County. I think we all agree, all sides agree with the procedural changes. Thank you so much for working hard to work those things out. The other substantial change that we really need your help with is to make the findings of the arbitration panel have a little more teeth. Currently, the most they can do is impose conditions that last for 1 year. And really, in the process of a major land development deal, 1 year just really isn't meaningful. They just build that time in to the process. I wanted 5 years. ACCG asked for 3 years. The bill calls for 2. So it's a very small incremental increase, but it will be more significant. It will give the developer and the city pause to consider that there might be a 2-year delay before the development could go forward. And that gives it at least some level of substance. As currently written, the 1-year delay is almost meaningless. So thank you so much for your help. Thank you for bringing it this far.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to kind of add to that, to kind of one of the things that we did ensure to maintain in the bill and in the code as it is now is, yes, the panel findings and conditions can be imposed for up to 2 years. However, there's also provision in the code that says that if the parties involved reach a mutually agreeable decision aside from that, then those conditions go away immediately. So there's no time frame on that. So it's not like it's a 2 years never ending type situation.
Right. Good. Okay.
And I would just say in closing, thanks again for everyone. We do support the bill and ask your favorable consideration.
Okay. And we have Charlotte Davis. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairman Williams and committee members. I'm Charlotte Davis with the Georgia Municipal Association. And I want to just echo the comments of my colleagues at ACCG. Our association has taken a formal support position for Representative Anderson's bill as well. And I do have to thank him for working so closely with our organization and our members when we support his bill, because the changes on the scheduling, shot clocks, and reporting really will streamline the process. And this is an issue that is obviously very relevant for our memberships, but largely annexations do work at the local level and they play out well. But in cases where objections do go to arbitration, we think that his legislation will really help clarify a lot of questions from both cities and counties. And again, I just want to thank him for working so closely. He attended our entire membership conference and convention earlier this year to talk about this bill. And there've been several substitutes and iterations that we've worked through, and he's been really helpful in responding to some of our questions. And to the specific question about the not valid language, having that in the bill is important to us, and largely because we see the arbitration panels as one of their key functions. The crux of what they're to solve is whether an objection is valid or not. And that's why we support extending the time frame up front for the county to review the materials to make sure that if they do have an objection, then they can prove that it's valid. But if not, and an objection is found to be not valid, that we do believe they should take the cost of arbitration. Again, that's in the bill, and both of our organizations have agreed to that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else on the committee have any questions? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Let's see, Representative Bodie, are you here?
Yes.
House Bill 1373, if you would come to the table and get you to present yours, please, sir.
Yes, sir. First of all, I want to thank the committee members and Madam Chair for allowing me the opportunity to present this legislation. This legislation is the embodiment of a study committee that was impaneled back in 2019. The name of the study committee, or the name of the bill as well, was HR 259. Study committee was called the Johnny Talbert III Heat Stroke, Cardiac Arrest, and Other Youth-Related Industries Study Committee. A final study committee report was published on January the 20th of 2020. That should be in the committee's package today. The study committee was a bipartisan collaboration. From this study committee, we were tasked with coming up with various recommendations to present to the Speaker of the Georgia House of Representatives. So I want to kind of put this legislation into context and just kind of walk us through the reasons why I filed this legislation back in 2019 for a study committee. Over 650 people in the country die per year from exposure to extreme heat. These deaths are preventable. Heat is considered a silent killer. Georgia had the most heat-related football deaths in the country within with 6 between 1980 and 2009. Currently, Georgia is in the top 5 for youth-related deaths, youth-related heat deaths in America. That's top 5. And in recent years, Georgia has had heat-related football deaths in both youth and high school athletic leagues. In 2016, in July of 2016, Mr. Johnny Tolbert III, who was a 12-year-old, died from a heat stroke during football practice for a youth recreation team at the Welcome Hall Park in the new city of South Fulton. But at the time, it was part of unincorporated South Fulton, which is part of my house district. In 2015, Burke County High School football player Reddick Rod Williams died shortly after football practice in Waynesboro, Georgia, and his death was heat-related. In 2019, Miss Amani Bell, a Clayton County High School junior, died while her 2 high school football coaches made Miss Bell and her high school girls basketball team perform jumping jacks, circle a football field, and then jog up a set of stadium stairs. The heat index that day soared to 103 degrees. That was a date in August in Clayton County. Ms. Bell died from a heart attack due to the extreme temperature, which also left her with hypothermia. Ms. Amani Bell was the oldest child in her family, and as a high school junior, Ms. Amani was taking advanced classes for college credit and was heading to college in the fall of 2019. Nearly 2 years after her death, Clayton County District Attorney Tasha Mosley charged the 2 basketball coaches who oversaw Amani's practice session with murder, cruelty to children, involuntary manslaughter, and reckless conduct. Per the legislation I have here today, HB 1373, these deaths could have been avoided. If you look at the final committee report from January 2020, if you go to page 3, Mr. Richard Lamper, the president of the Georgia Association of Nurses, or the Georgia Nurses Association, basically stated in his testimony to the study committee that if a cold water bath is available to immediately cool the core temperature of a youth, of the athlete until EMS or another medical provider could respond, that child's life could be saved. And Mr. Lamper is actually here today. I want to kind of just walk you through the bill. It is a bipartisan piece of legislation. Chairman Carpenter actually originally carried this legislation back in 2020, and now I'm carrying the new legislation here today. The most important part of this legislation is that it was a compromise. We had a lot of medical providers, experts from literally across the country to fly in to talk about this very issue. And so we balanced whether we wanted our state to take up, I would say, the financial responsibility of providing the cold tubs. And what we came up with is that we stated that if a youth athletic team is contracting with a county park or recreation or a city park and recreation, that the county and city park and recreation will be responsible for making sure that youth athletic team or league that they're sponsoring will have the cold tub available. You probably have also in your folder a $206 Rubbermaid cold tub. These are the cold tubs that were suggested by not only the president of the Georgia Nurses Association, but also it was suggested by a ER physician that came in and testified as well. You probably also see where a lawsuit that was filed and settled for a youth tackle football league in the amount of $1 million is also in your package. And if you go to page 3 of 9, and you look under the last section, it states rapidly cooling involves planning prior to the emergency so that the necessary equipment and supplies are instantly available. Ice water baths are the preferred cooling technique and in mixed tubs. A water source and ice must be available with staff trained on a rapid setup. It is not necessary to use an expensive tub, a Rubbermaid container of significant size, or a wading pool will work. So basically, we came up with the qualification or the requirement of 150-pound or 150-gallon cooling tub or water tub is because some of our youth athletes are over 100 pounds, and some are over 150, and some can get up to 200 pounds, depending on if they're offensive linemen or not. And so we felt like this will basically cover our youth and have a situation where we can actually save the lives of our youth athletes. In Gwinnett County, one park in Gwinnett County has over 100 youth athletic leagues. Unlike the Georgia Association or the Georgia High School Sports Association, we really do not have a lot of control over those organizations. I know the Georgia Parks and Recreation may actually speak here today, but we actually do not have a lot of oversight as a General Assembly. And so we want to be as minimal as possible in having a requirement, but at the same time, making sure that our youth will be saved if they had a heat stroke or heat-related injury. Also, I have City Council member Helen Willis, who also represents that portion of South Fulton, the new city of South Fulton and Welcome Park. She's been with us throughout the study committee hearings. We actually had a study committee hearing at Welcome Park. And also Ms. Wright is here today. That is the mother of Johnny Talbot III. And also his two lawyers are here too, Attorney Miley Davis and Attorney Harold Spitz. But at this time, I want to have the mother to speak and also her attorneys. And then I would like to have the president of the Georgia Nurses Association to speak as well. And I think Councilwoman Helen Willis has some words too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The names here, so yes, Ms. Wright. Would you like to come to the table and sit, or you want to present from the podium, or?
Yes.
First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss, ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks for having me first. I said I wasn't going to get here and do this, but I can't help it.
It's quite all right.
Johnny was my only child. He was 12 years old at his passing. He played all different types of sports. Very loving. He had cousins, he had aunties and uncles, grandparents that loved him. He wasn't a bad child at all. He didn't get in trouble in school. Everyone loves my baby. I'm asking that you all please take this into consideration. Not only for my child, but for other kids as well. He's not here, so we can't bring them back, but we can save other kids out here. So I'm not only asking for him, I'm asking for the other kids that are playing these sports out here too. If y'all are parents, y'all understand your kids are everything to you. My child was everything to me. I can't give him a hug anymore. I can't kiss him anymore. I can't tell him I love him anymore. Those are things I can't do, but someone else can if we put this in place. I don't know how much more I can stress. If you haven't lost a child, you cannot feel my pain at all. I walk around every day with a smile on my face because I have to, but deep down, I am torn apart. It is stressful and hard. Please take this into consideration. I can't even go to Welcome Mall Park anymore. I love seeing the kids play. I love going to sports, to watch the Little League. It's hard for me to go to that park. I don't want to drive by that park. I don't want to go and support the park. Please help me out. I want to be able to do those things again.
We all sympathize with you for your loss so very much. We know you're brokenhearted. May God give you peace. If you'd identify yourself, please.
Good morning. My name is Harold Spence. On July 14th, 2016, at 7:30 p.m., the temperature was 93 degrees. The humidity was about 38%. Following a rigorous 2-hour training session, 12-year-old Johnny Tolbert collapsed on the field. He fell to the ground. His body shook. He foamed at the mouth, and his eyes rolled upward into the back of his head, so to speak. And one of the most tragic parts of that was that the events that I just described to you, both of his parents were literally by his side and actually witnessed what I just described. The coaches brought out towels, wet them, and fanned them over Johnny Tolbert's body. It took 20 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. We know what happens when a youth experiences a heat-related injury. Brain cells begin to die, body cells begin to die. And although it took 20 minutes for the ambulance to arrive, the most important factor is not the transport. The most important immediate factor is cooling down the body of that child. Why? Because cooling down the body may save that child's life. And also because we know that brain cells and body cells begin to die, cooling down that child's body, if that child survives, may end up enhancing the quality of that child's life. Had Johnny Tolbert been submerged in ice water in a cold tub immediately, I mean, none of us can say with certainty what would have happened. And I'm not here to pretend that I could say with certainty what could have happened. But we know that his chances for survival would have been enhanced had his body temperature been allowed to cool down in a cold water tub. By the time he got to the emergency room, his body temperature was still almost 107 degrees. There are many here who have participated in youth athletics, and we know that that is a significant part of the growth and development of a lot of our children. And we applaud that. A lot of us have fond memories of participating in youth athletics at parks and recreational facilities. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. We simply ask today that we do what we can to make it safe. When something like this happens, we ask ourselves, why did it happen? What can we do to make sure that it doesn't happen again? And perhaps the third and most important question is, what are we willing to do to make sure that it doesn't happen again? So determined lawmakers like Representative Bodie and others have doggedly pursued this issue. And they're here to address that third question. What is it that we are willing to do to make sure that this doesn't happen to another child and that our children can participate in youth sports activities safely? We ask that you would support the legislation that Representative Bodie is offering here today.
Thank you, sir. Did you wish to speak, sir?
Yes, just very Just very briefly, I'm Attorney Maoli Davis, and as my law partner Harold Spence has mentioned, we are in full support of this legislation. We'd also add that we've previously flown in an expert from Virginia who has even more ideas about how this can be regulated. So when Representative Bodie said this is a minimalist approach, truly it is. There are other approaches that are even more intensive that we hope someday we'll get there. But this for Ms. Wright and for Johnny Tolbert's family would be a very, very important first step. Ms. Wright has not just committed herself to this cause, but has participated with us in having a Johnny Tolbert scholarship for young people so that she can see young people who graduate from high school continue on to go to college, because she wants to see the dreams that she was not able to see with her own son realized through other young people. So I just wanted to put into context the kind of mother and the kind of woman that sits before you, and why we remain continually by her side in support of her advocacy, and the fact that she is making this cry as a mother, but as a community member as well. So thank you all for hearing us, and we hope that this will pass, and we hope that it will be in her son's name. Thank you.
Thank you. Did y'all consider limiting the practice sessions also at a mandatory break after an hour?
Yes. So what happened is, Mr. Chair, we had a athletic trainer from, I believe, Rome, Georgia, to come down and testify. Actually, we have someone here today from the Georgia Athletic Trainers Association. And we talked about coaches having the proper training on heat-related injuries and also on CPR, and to have a certification to do that. Also, yes, the practice sessions that you're talking about are regulated through the Georgia High School Association. If you got a certain temperature and a certain heat index, you can't even go out and practice. Like or the practice has to be done in a very, very, I would say, safe way. The time frame, the time of day, the whole nine. We all know, every one of us represent a district here in Georgia. July and August are the hottest months of the year. And that's normally when these youth organizations and leagues, and also high school leagues, are practicing. And you heard the scenario where the young lady died in Clayton County practicing in July, getting ready for the basketball season. So yes, but again, we would need legislation to regulate the youth leagues on that as well. And that was something that the study committee jostled with, but they stated that we would probably need more robust legislation to do that. And I don't know if we're there just yet. I would like it, just like the Georgia High School Association, Sports Association, but we don't have it yet, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let's see, Representative Minor, you're on Zoom.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My condolences for the mom. That is just terrible. My question is for the attorney. He mentioned something about regulation, and so I just wanted him to elaborate on what he meant by that.
So one of the things that our expert raised was that part of building a young person is building up their aerobic system, and that most aerobic systems of young people who carry a certain amount of weight has not been built up. But we put them on the field and ask them to do the exact same thing. You would have essentially a running back and a lineman doing the same kind of sprints, expecting to make the same kinds of times, and their aerobic system is not built up to the point that they're able to release that heat, and that's what results in their body overheating. And so with that, there are some baseline tests that can be done with every athlete so that you know where they are aerobically, so that you can set a prescriptive plan for them to build up to the point of being able to exert themselves to a certain level. And we actually had those experiments done where we could do the baseline with athletes. We did that over at Decatur YMCA with Representative Bodie and other representatives present so that you could see what it takes and how long it takes for a young person's body to cool down based on the strength of their aerobic system. And so that's what we mean by there being other measures that could be in place, that testing at the very beginning of each season before you even begin to practice would clarify where each individual student, athlete is, where they are with respect to their aerobic system. So we hope that that's ultimately where we end up, because that will be the safest for at all levels.
Okay, thank you. Representative Chairman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author of this, first of all, thank you for bringing this bill. My heart goes out. I have not experienced that. I have no way of understanding the way that the lady feels, but it is a major concern. I have children. My children are grown. I have a grandson now who is active in sports and athletics, so I can understand, having experienced similar situations in the past and being around those who have. A couple of questions that I had. First of all, the bill specifically addressed county, municipal, local government authorities which operate parks and recreation facilities shall ensure that these tanks are in place to be available to be used. I know from my own past experience serving as a coach and working with other coaches, a lot of times, especially in more rural areas, many times the practice location may be left at the discretion of the coach. And a lot of times we utilize facilities that are not controlled nor part of a local government system. And was there any discussion related to that, or any provision related to that sort of thing? Because if we're going to require it to be done, it's equally as likely something could happen out away from a locally owned facility.
Yes, and we actually talked about that. One of the things we talked about, Mr. Representative, is having it where it's across the board, but if we were to require our parks and recreation that actually operate the youth leagues themselves, I think the committee was threading the line of, do we want to have some type of preemptive legislation or some type of unfunded mandated on local municipalities and counties? And so we chose to go with the legislation on independent leagues. However, again, we jostle with it, and I'm definitely open to a friendly amendment to make that happen. But it was a situation where we didn't want the state of Georgia to pay for it, but we did want someone to pay for it. And we thought the better way to do that was to require that the municipality or the county require that youth sports league to do it. But I'm completely open to that. And I actually have talked to other experts that stated that, like, look, when you get outside the metro areas, things run a little bit differently, but we need to have the same type of safeguards.
Gotcha. Okay. And Mr. Chairman, follow up if I may. Okay. Just
two more bills.
Just real quickly, this would be just in a general comment. Yes. That I would recommend that we maybe look at what is being required here. Just having a tank available is not sufficient if you don't have the water and the ice to go in it, that sort of thing. So I'll just leave it at that as a comment. So.
And Mr. Representative, you're absolutely correct. And what one of the physicians stated, the ER physician stated that we could actually use the ice water from the Gatorade tank or the Gatorade bucket to actually pour into the cold tub, kind of just as an emergency. Because I know some of the athletic leagues were stating that, well, we may not be close to water and ice, but if you're going to have water, you got to have water and ice out there for the athletes. So if we have to use that to fill up the cold tub quickly, we can.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see, we have some people signed up. Jeff Hop. Is that correct?
My name is Jeff Pop. I'm former president of the Georgia Athletic Trainer Association, current vice president for the Southeast Athletic Trainer Association. We do advocate for this bill. I was part of the study that was involved with the Georgia High School Association to develop the heat guidelines there. Correct that we would need to make sure that there's a little bit more education done. So we would be certainly advocating for educating the parks and recs on how to use these devices. To answer your question a little bit about avoiding practice times and monitoring that, Georgia High School Association in our study, when we develop our heat guidelines, we do advocate for the use of a wet bulb globe temperature device to determine when it is safe to practice outside in the heat. So we would certainly advocate for something like that in the future to be added to this, or a new bill to be added that would require the wet bulb globe temperature to be monitored and practices determined based on that.
Okay. Thank you very much. No questions. Mr. Richard Lampus, is that correct?
Lampier. Thank you, committee, for allowing me to testify today. My name is Richard Lampier, and I'm the immediate past president of the Georgia Nurses Association, and we are in support of this bill. And I just want to walk you through this. We really believe this is the key piece of equipment that you need to be able to help save a child's life. The reason for that is the children are out practicing. They get overheated. We call 911. The ambulance gets there. That ambulance has been sitting in the same heat as the children have been practicing in. The back of the ambulance is 100 degrees. We put the victim in there. Their temperature continues to go up. We get them to the emergency room. Nurses in the emergency room, the way we cool patients in the hospital is we use gloves. We put ice in the gloves, place the gloves in the groin and the armpits to try to cool the temperature down. That's not fast enough. We need to cool the victim before we transport them. So we really think this piece of equipment is so important to have at the facility to begin that cooling process before we transport them. That's why we feel it's so important to have this piece of equipment available at the facilities. And the Georgia Nurses Association is willing to offer any help we can to provide training to any coaches or cities or municipalities that would like that part. We have close to 170,000 licensed nurses in the state of Georgia, all throughout the state. We'd be more than willing to put that out there to allow those nurses to come help train any coaches or any cities or leagues that you have.
All right. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
No, sir. Council member Helen Willis. And again, I'm sorry, we're running out of time, so just keep your comments brief if you would, please. Thank you.
Good morning. I have been attending these hearings for the past 3 years, and I'm just very disappointed that we are still here. To me, this is a minimum ask, an ice tub training to save our babies. Johnny Talbert, his life would never be given back to us, but we do not need to allow his life to be in vain. We will never forget him in the city of South Fulton. We will never forget him at Welcome All Park. And I just would agree with Ms. Wright, please allow this legislation to proceed. The fees for the county, for the cities, that's nothing. You know, we have fees for less punitive reasons in our municipalities. What we are close to in most municipalities are fire stations. Fire stations do have water, they do have ice, and they can help us make sure we have what we need for these tubs. I beg of you to please allow this to go forward, training and ice tubs. I don't understand why we're here. Georgia's known for a lot of things, but we do not need to be known for allowing our kids to die from preventable heat-related injuries. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steve Card.
Mr. Chair, Subcommittee, thank you very much for your time. My name is Steve Card. I'm the Executive Director for the Georgia Recreation and Park Association. We represent a little over 200 park and rec agencies, city and county owned, and approximately 1,700 recreation professionals. I had the opportunity and want to thank Representative Bodie for having a conversation with him on Friday concerning this bill. And it is certainly our intent to support the intent of what this bill is all about, which is to protect our youth. That's what our profession does. That's our first and foremost that we try to do. As we go throughout and look throughout the bill, certainly there are a few concerns that the Parks and Rec field has as it relates to this, as far as some of the logistics and potential liabilities of what this may mean, meaning as far as how many potential vessels are there throughout the Parks and Rec facilities based on how many practice areas there are, the ability to be able to get the ice. Most of the park practice areas are not near concession stands, and based if you're in metro or if you're in rural, again, as Representative mentioned, it may be in various different aspects of the facility that you have. We also, and kind of as I start winding up, we also want to talk about from a sanitation standpoint, how is this sanitized every day? What does it look like as far as that? And we feel the most important aspect that we can do to hopefully help tragedies in the future is education. And, I'd just like to wind up, as I know you wanted this quick, to our willingness to work with Representative Bodie and as well as anybody else to see what we can do as the professionals to try to put something in place to make sure that something as tragic as what happened to Miss Wright's son does not happen again, and we can move forward in a safe manner. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Card. Now, I expect you all to be working together to get that resolved, that difference. Thank you. Mr. Bodie, again, this meeting is just hearing only.
Yes.
And we'll go before the full committee later. And thank you very much for all your testimony. And again, Ms. Wright, please accept our utmost condolences. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And thank you, committee members.
We're going to hear House Bill 923 next. And I'm sorry, we're running close on time and running. You got 2 minutes. Can you do it in 2 minutes? I'm teasing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have had an interest in the work of the over 700 or 900, we're not sure how many exactly, development authorities across Georgia for a couple of years at this point. And we had a good hearing before your subcommittee last year in relation to House Bill 66. I bring forward for the subcommittee's consideration this morning a new subcommittee, a new substitute to House Bill 923, which is 1659S. And Molly has assisted me in providing a number of different articles about the examination of development authority operations in and around primarily the metropolitan Atlanta area. Much of this activity and dispute resolution discussions going on in relation to development authority does relate to my district. DeKalb County, I'm not sure exactly how many development authorities we have, but probably over 30. Each of our 13 cities has a development authority and a downtown development authority. And we also have multiple county development authorities. There is reality, very little transparency to the number of development authorities and to the amount of bond that they are issuing in relation to economic development projects. I have said publicly, and every time I've had a chance to talk about development authorities, that development authorities and the issuance of economic incentives, tax abatements, and tax incentives are a valuable tool for economic development across Georgia. The issues that I wish the General Assembly to consider is what is the transparency in relation to those entities? What is the total amount of debt that we're creating for whom? Some of those issues were lifted up in relation to a possible discussion of Buckhead. Do we know how many development authorities there are in your district? Do you know? And do you know the amount of debt they have issued through bonds for the purpose of granting tax incentives and tax abatement opportunities for economic development in your district? That's the question I ask any member of the General Assembly to ask in relation to your own district. For my district, we have had a great deal of conflict in relation to who has a right to know about a development authority package of tax incentives, and who does it impact? For instance, the litigation between DeKalb County and Brookhaven, I represent a part of Brookhaven, has brought the issue forward is whether or not the school system that's impacted by a development authority tax incentive, tax abatement problem offering has the opportunity as a matter of law to object. We're talking about bond validation hearings now of development authorities. We're not talking about the dispute resolution system that Representative Anderson and I worked on earlier in relation to the annexation discussions. The judges in both DeKalb County, Superior Court judge in DeKalb County and Superior Court judge in Fulton County, when the issue has come forward, has said that school systems should have standing and has allowed the school system to come into the bond validation hearing. As you may know, the only legal notice under law right now that a county, and only a county, not a school district, not a city that's impacted by tax incentives, the only legal notice only given to a county opportunity to come in and object is through a legal ad in the newspaper. House Bill 923, the substitute I brought for your consideration, does a number of different things to create more transparency and more opportunity for the impacted governments, cities, schools districts, particularly for thinking about this issue in context of my district. I have 3 school districts in my district and 4 cities in my district and unincorporated DeKalb. And my district is, again, the opportunity for a lot of different development, redevelopment in a maturing county with a lot of activity and a lot of tax incentives and tax abatements that are offered for the purpose of enhancing that economic development. House Bill 93 substitute at the first in line 2931 on page 2 gives a process by which a development authority member may be removed. We know that of the, well, I don't know, of the 700 development authorities, how many of those local legislations have specific opportunity for a development authority member to be removed. Last week, within the last 2 weeks, a Fulton County Development Authority member, when there were significant issues in relation to performance or allegations of improper gifts and improper activities, all of which is in news articles that is before you to read, she chose to resign when presented by significant evidence that she'd accepted significant gifts from developers seeking tax abatements, but she was not required to resign. There was no mechanism that she be required to resign. She chose to do so, but she was not required to. That is what is added in lines 2931. Section 2, beginning on lines 41, I have put a limitation on the per diem that a development authority member may earn. Several years ago, and we defined the opportunity for development authorities in 4 counties to seek a per diem, only 4 counties. Those are Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, and Gwinnett. And all of 923 relates only to Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, and Gwinnett. This is based on a compromise that I've brought forward for the consideration of the committee based on many people who told me many things about your development authorities in the more rural areas where perhaps it's true that people do talk to each other more extensively. They do have cooperative corporations, discussions about economic development that's going to impact the entire county. The hot developing areas in Fulton and DeKalb and Cobb and Gwinnett are not having those cooperative discussions. And the newspaper articles that I've given you in relation to the litigation in DeKalb and the misfeasance in Fulton and the misfeasance apparent issues about the history of the the Stonecrest Development Authority all give me an opportunity to suggest to you that if we apply these reforms to only these 4 counties, that'll be a significant step forward. Section 2 says that the per diem shall be limited. One of our Fulton County Development Authorities was offering up per diems based on agenda items, which was over $1,000 per diem per day based on agenda items. That kind of activity would be stopped by Section 2. Section 3 is the difficult discussion and opportunity for other impacted governments in these 4 counties who are impacted by the tax incentives and tax abatements. Their budgets are changed based on these offerings, to receive notice of a bond development hearing and to give them standing to appear in court. Right now, under the law, only the county is entitled to notice, and that notice is only developed by extended through a legal ad in the newspaper. Section 3, beginning on page 5, line 97, I'm providing notice to impacted governments in the area, 7 days notice, and the opportunity to object if they wish to. Members of the committee, one of the reasons I have been active in this area and had many discussions over the last 1.5 years, 2 years with a wide variety of folks that are engaged in this area is that I want to have a public discussion. I'm interested in what the development authorities, the Georgia Economic Development Association says. I want to know whether they support ethics committee oversight over their development authorities. I want to know whether they support a specific statutory opportunity consistently to remove a development authority member. I'd like to know how they would suggest us moving forward on the issues of transparency and on the issues of involvement and engagement on these significant grants of financial incentives, tax abatements to developers who are seeking an opportunity to produce their developments. In our area, in the high volume, high development area, we also have a phenomena right now that I think this bill will address of a developer shopping his or her package to multiple development authorities. I hear fairly often, I hear a story about a developer being told for a city, yes, we'll give you incentives, but we want you to do low cost housing as part of your development project. The developer then goes to another one and starts competing against. Is that in the interest of the taxpayer? These projects are not for enhancing the profitability of the developer. These projects are for the enhancement of the taxpayer and the community for economic development opportunities. Mr. Chairman, I am happy to answer questions. This is some parts of this bill are very difficult and dense. Other parts are simple. Should we have a statutory opportunity for development authorities to remove a member and replace him or her? Should the development authorities be subject to any ethics commission that may exist in a county? And should an impacted government whose tax receipts will be changed by incentives and tax abatement be entitled to notice? Those are fairly simple to understand concepts. They may be difficult to apply given the fact that our whole development of these 700 plus development authorities has been based on negotiations that are private and based on no notice to impacted governments and based on a variety of different business practices that are not always in the interest of the taxpayer.
Thank you very much. Any committee members? Let's see, number 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple quick questions. I know the biggest thing I see is adding school systems as part of the standing. Right now, they don't have any standing. They're not even included. If there is a bond taken out right now, are they subject to it? Are they on the line for it? Who is on the line when a granting is done for this type of a bond? Is it the county only? Is it the authority, or is whoever's on the authority?
I think that's a fabulous question. And I have been asking that question myself. Who's responsible for these bonds? If the Stonecrest Development Authority issues a development project of $750 million and there is no product coming from that, and there's no cash visible anywhere, and the development opportunity is called a phantom bond, what does that mean as a matter of law? In the more traditional issuance of bonds, I think who's responsible for that bond is going to be what the bonding lawyer and the actual documents say. The development authority is the primary entity responsible for it, but who backs up the development authority? And I can't give you one answer to that question.
My understanding locally for me, it's the county. That's why I'm wondering with all of this, we're going to extend some great liability here to school systems that they don't currently have.
As a matter of law, I can't answer that with any real confidence.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Kevin Shea. Is that right?
That is correct,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing me.
And if you could keep the comments real brief, I understand I've gone over my time, but thank you.
I will do that, Mr. Chair and subcommittee members. Thank you for hearing me. I'm Kevin Shea. I'm the president of the Georgia Economic Developers Association, or GEDA. And GEDA is an organization that represents almost 700 members around the state. We have 3/4 of Georgia's counties have members of GEDA in them. And many of the development authorities that are county development authorities and some others are members of GEDA. So we are concerned with jobs and investment, and these persons are charged, the organizations are charged with creating jobs and investment in their communities. So I am speaking in opposition to this bill on behalf of our members because we have concerns about the local politics being interjected into the process in the removal of directors that the bill calls for. And also we have concern that the bill will stifle economic development because of the notice provisions that are in the law as well. This bill is a combination of 923 and 924. And as such, we are opposed to the bill as it stands.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Don't
Mr.
have
Chairman.
any questions. Jeff. I can't read your last name. Rader, okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I am a DeKalb County Commissioner, and Representative Oliver represents part of my district. But 2 quick points that I would like to make is that by passing this bill, and particularly in these big 4 counties, what you will be doing is compelling development authorities to work with the governing authorities whose tax base that they are putting to work to provide these incentives. The way that the incentive works is that the development authority is exempt from taxes. So what the development authority does is that they issue bonds with which they buy, and the proceeds of those bonds, quote unquote, are used to buy the property that is normally taxable. Once it belongs to the development authority, then it's not taxable. So the liability for the bonds is between the development authority and the owner of the property. Within that transaction, there's also the return of the property back to the commercial owner. So there is no liability to the county or the school system, but it is a means to make the property tax exempt. That's the whole purpose of issuing those bonds. The validation hearing is because any bond that is issued by a subdivision of the state has to be validated by the Superior Court. And that's the opportunity for parties to the transaction to be able to raise issues as to whether or not it's in the public interest. And the third point that I would make is that this is going to cause them all to cooperate with each other. They will enter into intergovernmental agreements that will define what constitutes a valid incentive, and then they will be bound by those intergovernmental agreements so that this process can proceed as it had in the past, but with those stakeholders now represented at the table. This is only for 4 counties. This is where, as Representative Oliver said, this is where we're having the problem because they're too big, they're complex, and some jurisdictions are not as cognizant of the interests of the whole as they are in smaller areas where you have more unified leadership. So we really appreciate you considering it. I think that frankly, this focus on a smaller subset of counties is exactly the way that we need to go forward. And then it will certainly help to improve the situation. Thank you.
Okay. We may have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Gather.
I'll be brief. So in my experience, I'm out in Paulding County, it's not too far, Metro Atlanta. We did have some bonds done by a development authority. One was related to a movie studio. And the development authority no longer paid on those bonds. And so I know you said this doesn't affect the actual counties themselves. It'd be between the development authority and the owner of the property. But ultimately, those bonds were paid by the taxpayers of the county because those bond payments weren't being made by the Economic Development Authority at that time. So I'm not sure if that's an actual, I don't know how it differs between a larger counties like the four you mentioned and other counties, but that is the way it happened in my county. And, it was a big mess at the end
And the
of the day,
difference
but-
may be in industrial revenue bonds, which actually generate money, and these quote phantom bonds, which are the transaction that simply puts the title for the property in the hands of the development authority as opposed to the private owner. The private owner then leases it back for a de minimis amount and continues to get the revenue off of it. But because it is owned, quote unquote, by a subdivision of the state, it is exempt from taxes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Bowen.
Mr. Chairman, I'm authorized to say just briefly that bill is supported by the ACCG and Fulton County.
Yes, Kathleen Bowen with ACCG, going on record that we do support this bill. We appreciate Representative Oliver digging deep on this issue for years. This has been a lot of work and a lot of research on her behalf to do this. We'd like to see some of this applied to all counties, but we think this is a good first step to get to the heart of the matter and where the issues are occurring. So we do support this bill. There's any questions? Thank you.
No, thank you. Let's see, Charlotte Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, I'm Charlotte Davis with the Georgia Municipal Association, and GMA actually supports Representative Oliver's bill as well. I haven't had an opportunity to review the substitute, but on Chair Oliver's goals about transparency for development authority members and reform, we appreciate the intent and we do support that. And also 923 as introduced, does codify local ethics boards' abilities that cities have and create locally in many cases. And our organization actually has a certified city of ethics program that those local ethics boards can apply to. And so this codifies those standards that our organization cares about as well. So we appreciate your leadership in this discussion, Representative Oliver. And on the second half for the proposed changes in the substitute, we'll review as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other committee members? And we have run out of time, so we will not be able to hear 1439 today. I apologize for that. But no other questions. We'll stand adjourned. Thank you.